Okay, let's talk about building community. Building community is important as well. And this is another thing when we talk about blended courses, hybrid courses, that people tend to ignore because they just assume that because there is face-to-face time in the course that there's really not a need to build community. But it's not. You shouldn't look at it in terms of there's a need for it. You should look at it in terms of it's a need to help with the online portion of the blended course, meaning that you have to build community to be able to get students to get the resources and the help that they need to be successful in a course like that. So I want to talk about using social media and then establishing presence in a course and the online portion of the course, humanizing the course, and then also the importance of the student-to-student interaction. So I have this little graph that I was able to find that talks about building a learning community, not just a learning community and combining courses together, but this is more of a learning community outside of your classroom. And one of the things that you're able to do is to add social presence. Think of social presence as what's happening when students today, or just people in general today, are using social media like Facebook. You know, there's that social presence of people online. They're participating with each other. They're interacting with each other. They're building friendships, and they're learning from each other, whether it's a classroom setting or not. That's social presence. And then what happens when we build a community is we build teaching presence. So the typical model for teaching is just the instruction. You know, and a lot of times teachers feel like that's their only role. They build presence by, here I am, I'm the teacher, look at me, I'm going to impart my knowledge. But when you're dealing with the online portion of the class, there has to be a little bit more involved in that. It involves the design of the course and how things are structured and organized. Of course, the instruction is still there, but you also have to think about how you, the instructor, will facilitate what goes on online, and then the direction that you take in the online portion of the class. It's very different than what you do in the face-to-face class. And then, of course, in addition to social presence and teaching presence, you have cognitive presence. And that can come as either structured or unstructured. And again, it goes back to those groups. With the structured, by designing these groups, you're having the groups explore, synthesize, and resolve issues that you're teaching in class. But with unstructured groups, you're thinking of maybe the whole class. There's lots of exploration going on and so forth. So I wrote out the definitions here for you for presence, just so you can familiarize yourself with them again. Oops, I moved that slide. I'll go back to the other one. And here's social presence again, the ability of students to project themselves socially and effectively in a community of inquiry. And then the cognitive presence is the extent to which students are able to construct and confirm meaning through sustained discourse in a community of inquiry. And then, of course, teaching presence is the design, facilitation, and direction of cognitive and social processes for the realization of personally meaningful and educationally worthwhile learning outcomes. Okay? So when we're thinking about social presence and teaching presence, we have to think of ways to do that. So let me go back to this social media slide. And this is one of the things that is very helpful for us because we have these tools that are available for us. Most of us are stuck using LMSs that don't really help us with this, of establishing presence in the classroom. Blackboard, we used Blackboard for years, and we're just now moving away from it. And this is one of the reasons. It's because we weren't able to do some of these practices that we have learned by teaching online and hybrid that are effective in teaching and learning. So we're able to integrate a lot of things like RSS. If you have students going out and doing research, they can subscribe to RSS and have data delivered to them. You know, you can have students blogging and not just providing content to the class or even to the general public, but also reading blogs that are written on topics that you're discussing in class. So what happens is with the social media tools that are available to us, it will help us get students involved in the content that they're learning. It will help students to be able to create content. And you know, when they're creating content, they're learning content. It helps students to discuss. I mean, one of the things that I disliked about Blackboard was the discussion forums were very difficult to manage and to have sort of that social presence integrated into it. But there are other tools that you could possibly use if you're willing to go outside of your course management system. It's not required, but if you're willing to, it makes the discussion a little more engaging, I would say. You can also use these tools to help promote and also to measure the learning that's going on in your classroom. So there's lots of options. And I put this graph up here that I found because it shows a good number of them, but there's so many others that are there. And it's not about just choosing a bunch of different tools and inundating your students with, we're going to use Flickr and Twitter, and we're going to do RSS and YouTube, and we're going to get on Blogger, and oh yeah, and Facebook too. You don't want to do that. It's really about choosing one or two tools that you can use effectively in the class to help you with establishing presence, both social and teaching presence. Okay, so let's talk about establishing presence. So as an instructor, teaching presence, I already talked about what it is, the definition of it, but it's basically defining, facilitating, directing. Okay, so I want to talk about what it means to facilitate discourse, what it means to provide direct instruction, and then also the instructional design and organization. These are all necessary for you to establish presence in your class. And when I'm talking about establishing presence, remember, I'm talking about the online portion of the class, which then it does overlap into the face-to-face as well. But a lot of instructors will just rely on the fact that, oh, students can see me, they know I'm a real person, they know I'm here. But online, they really don't know that. They may only feel like you're there, you're only present in class. And by doing some of these things, it will help you establish that presence in the online portion of your class. So first, let's talk about facilitating discourse. Well, to do this, basically you are identifying areas of agreement and disagreement. So when you're online and you are interacting with your students, you're not just giving them things to do online. That's the one I have to fight with my faculty, is they just want to give more homework. And they go, okay, I'm hybrid now, I'm blended. And it's not about that. It's all about what we talked about earlier, putting these groups together, giving them key things to do to engage them online. So once you do that, you want to make sure that you're in there, you're identifying these areas that students are finding agreement with, whether it's about if they just like doing it or it's the content that they're agreeing with or disagreeing with. You're in there, you're facilitating that discourse. You're also seeking to reach consensus and understanding in certain areas, assignments and activities that you have them doing in the online environment. You're encouraging, acknowledging, and reinforcing student contributions. So again, that's that feedback that we're talking about. And I did a study. It was an unscientific, unplanned study, but one semester I was really busy and I put a lot of time into one online course and I ignored another course, not on purpose. I'm not admitting to being a bad teacher, but it happened. And I really noticed that the students who weren't getting my usual encouragement and acknowledgement to their post, I wasn't participating in some of the discussions in the sense that I was taking over, but I always like to go in and say, that was a great post, and I like the way and I sort of throw back to them what they were, the information they were providing to the class. And I really noticed that when I didn't do that in a discussion for a class, that the discussion really turned bad. Students just didn't want to participate. The content really wasn't as good as it had been previously, and I think it's really important. So encouraging, acknowledging, reinforcing. Also setting the climate for learning. One of the things that I try to do is I try to be very positive and excited about it, especially when I introduce a group activity, because immediately they all go, oh, I hate groups. And, I try to make sure that I set the climate. This is going to be great. This is going to be positive. I try to teach them about the things that will be beneficial to them if they participate in this in a positive way. Also, drawing in participants, prompting discussion and interaction is very important for you when you're facilitating your discourse or your discussions in these classes. Also, assessing the efficacy of the process. So is it efficient? Is it working well? Making sure that if things aren't going the way that you plan, that you step in, fix it, or change it, or eliminate it altogether, and not being afraid to do so as you go through. Okay, next for establishing presence is direct instruction. So obviously you're going to instruct, but remember when you are providing your online content as well, that is your direct instruction as well. So make sure that you are presenting content and questions online. Don't rely on just your face-to-face to provide this content, make sure that you focus the discussion. So when you are providing instruction and you're giving students discussion, make sure that you are also providing instruction within those discussions. So it's not just a happy-go-lucky discussion about what they did last week. It's really focused on content from the course. It's also a good practice to summarize the discussion, especially if it is focused on the content. You're confirming understanding in the online environment, whether it's a group activity or discussion forum. You're also diagnosing misperceptions. A lot of times this is where students are not afraid to sort of say things that they think are correct. And you can go in and either you or other students can think about what's been said and try to handle those problems that might appear. All right, it's your opportunity as well online to interject knowledge from the diverse sources. You are a knowledge base for these students, and a lot of times if you only limit that knowledge in the classroom, you're missing opportunities to do so that students can benefit from. All right, and then of course you can also respond to technical concerns. And that's going to come up. We can't avoid that. We spend a lot of time, especially in the beginning, addressing why so-and-so can't post their article that they found to the discussion forum. Why doesn't it work for me? And so forth. So you just need to make sure that you are providing that type of instruction as well. Okay, and then the last one for establishing presence is instructional design. And a lot of times instructors just assume that because they have been provided with a syllabus that the course has been designed already. But when you think about a syllabus, the syllabus doesn't always outline the hybrid portion of the class. So you want to make sure that you're setting the curriculum so that it is curriculum for a hybrid class and not just a face-to-face class that's pretending to be a hybrid. You want to make sure that you're using the designing methods that are established for creating online content for a course. You want to set time parameters because a lot of times we assign work that's done outside of the class and we don't realize that it might take a student 5 hours to complete it, and we thought it might take 2 hours. So, establishing time parameters so that students understand how much time they need to spend on work outside of the class and not just do one thing and say, well, I spent 5 hours. So making sure that they know. So, and what I mean by that is if you are teaching a 50-50 hybrid, 50% of your instruction time is online. So what does that equate to? Is that an hour? Is that 2 hours? In my case, that's an hour. It's an hour and 15 minutes of my instruction is online. So utilizing the medium effectively. So we talked about the social media, but also our own tools like the course management systems that we have. We want to make sure that we are using all of the tools that are available to us, and we're not just providing text, read this, text, read this. There's videos, there's opportunity for us to provide audio, to provide content, to organize our course. And then, of course, you have to establish netiquette. And what I mean by that, netiquette is just the rules for online learning. It includes just simple things like don't reply all on an email and don't send spam and don't type in all caps. I mean, there's lots of different lists of netiquette that are available online that you can grab and adjust to your own needs. But students need to hear this or see this because you can't just assume that they understand how to behave in an online environment.